There have always been housing problems, and there have always been people who have fought against them. Elton and Anstey's 1935 documentary was the first British film to give ordinary working class tenants their own voice.
You go up the stairs, you don't know whether you're coming down again or not. Same with the passage, that's all the same on the crook. In fact, everything in the house is on the crook. There's not a straight thing in it. What with the shoring up to the passage and the stairs and the coal cupboard, in fact, we've got no convenience whatever.
The private slum landlords had singularly failed to provide decent housing and fair rents.
I don't suppose people realise what it really is to be tied up in a one room and cannot get anything any better. We are only hoping that the council will liven their ideas up and get their minds made up to get the flats ready so that every working class man will have a hygienic flat to live in.
For the first time since the great post-war housing programmes, we're seeing an attempt by government to abolish council housing altogether. Stock transfer is the process whereby local authority council homes are transferred en masse to housing association bodies. A ballot is held in each local authority and tenants are given a vote to decide whether they want stock transfer or not. This film, a form of embedded journalism if you like, sides with tenants and activists from Edinburgh Against Stock Transfer who united to campaign for a no vote and to fight for the future of council housing.
Hello, I'm Sally Magnuson and I'm here in Edinburgh to find out about the Better Homes for Edinburgh programme. The programme will affect you and all council tenants because if it goes ahead, it will involve the transfer of all council housing to a new purpose-built housing association, City of Edinburgh Housing Association.
This pro-transfer DVD went out to every council house in Edinburgh. The Scottish Executive had allocated £5 million for a decidedly one-sided campaign, with Sally Magnuson frothing at its front. But despite the media celebrities and hard sell, many tenants in Edinburgh remained unconvinced about the transfer plans.
Most of the stuff we get through the letterboxes from the council is all smoke and mirrors. There is actually nothing of substance in it. It's all a big, lovely, you know, you'll wake up tomorrow morning after the ballot and you'll have these beautiful houses and the birds will be twittering in the trees and everything will be green and your children will be playing in these lovely lawns, etc. That's not going to happen.
This is reality. This is where the reality is not very nice, but this is where you find out what's really going to happen.
What we're actually dealing with here, stock transfer is a euphemism, it's just another word for privatisation. It's another word for selling the family silver. That's the reality of it. And if we allow stock transfer to actually go ahead and privatisation to be successful, then it'll be generations before we can get public housing back. This has got to be the stock transfer that ends all stock transfer.
The folk community itself, the council have really tried over the last couple of years to basically floor the place. A couple of years ago they tried to shut the school down, shut Folk Primary School down, which is a school that my son goes to, and with the intentions of selling the land off with what they call Smart School Initiative, the sale of prime land sites they called it. We had a campaign, we battled and we won and we managed to keep the school open. They wanted to do the same to Fort House. They wanted to demolish that as well because the land itself, because it's situated right beside Leith Docks, which is now becoming the new Riviera of the North. The land itself is worth a packet.
We got a feeling that this was a campaign that people were interested in.
That meeting was so important. People from that meeting came, got involved with it for the remainder of the year.
Quite a few people spoke from the floor, which again is sometimes unusual at a meeting like this. People didn't feel inhibited about speaking about this issue because it really concerned them. It was about, you know, where they lived, the future of their housing, and also housing for their children perhaps as well in the future.
If we could win the fight in Dundee with a 5 or 6 week campaign, I'm sure in 3 or 4 months that the people here can actually win that campaign.
I think if Edinburgh went for stock transfer, then that would be proof for the Scottish Executive that their policy was the right thing. If Edinburgh votes against stock transfer, then that is proof that there is a real swell of opinion out there that says this is really not acceptable.
Glasgow has a bad history of broken promises and false dawns when it comes to social housing. East went through there to check out the current situation after the transfer of all 83,000 council homes in 2002.
The thing in Glasgow is it's the aftermath of stock transfer.
East was invited by tenants in Glasgow to be part of an occupation of the Community Scotland building right in the heart of Glasgow's financial district. The reason for the occupation was one of the further betrayals, really, for the tenants of Glasgow. They had been promised that there would be more staff after stock transfer. The reality was that there was going to be massive cuts to the concierge service, the people who provide security and support services to people in tower blocks.
And basically all the promises that were made have not been kept. People's houses have been getting demolished, and there's been no formal, proper, decent consultation with tenants.
Save our homes! Save our homes! Save our homes! Save our homes! Save our homes!
People who'd voted for transfer, believing that their home was safe, were suddenly told their home was no longer safe. But worse than that, they weren't told whether they were going to get their homes knocked down or whether they weren't. They were left in perpetual insecurity.
We don't want demolition! We don't want demolition! We don't want demolition! We don't want demolition!
The amount and the scale of the demolitions was never accurately revealed to tenants beforehand, and even now the size, the extent of the demolition programme is only just becoming known.
We have come to Community Scotland because Community Scotland is over the Glasgow Housing Association and is over overall control of all housing in Scotland. And the bottom line is they're making the policy for stock transfers, for downgrading the 24-hour concierge system, for mass demolitions in Dundee and mass demolitions in Glasgow. And don't forget this, and this is what you really do need to know, the fact of the matter is the downgrading of the 24-hour concierge service in Glasgow is the part of an overall downgrading of services so that they can force people to leave the tower blocks, so that they can justify the mass demolition. Say they're half empty, let's knock them down. Well, we're here to say no to the downgrading of the 24-hour concierge service and no to the mass demolition.
Yeah, I remember they sent this woman in, a spokesperson from Community Scotland, because I mean obviously clearly they were absolutely gobsmacked that all these tenants had come in and taken the building over.
There's people from Milton, Red Road, Sighthill, and also Gorbals, Sandy Hills, and areas like that, south side of Glasgow. And there's also tenants from East, from the Edinburgh Against Stock Transfer.
A lot of the tenants who were there were really quite angry, and for quite good reason. And I think it really brought it home to her how poor some people had been treated when she came face to face with the realities of what it means to be a council tenant and to have a landlord who really treats you with so little respect.
The state of the building will go down and they'll give it GHA an excuse to demolish them.
That's right,
Give them an excuse to demolish, that's what they're looking for.
They want to get rid of the concierge and run the buildings down.
And then we'll all have to move it.
Can be part of a
Not
policy.
like my flat.
See, when the lady explained it, that concierge is more than he's more than a concierge. He's their lifeline in some places. You know, as you say, you know everybody first names, you know everybody. I've not seen Mrs. Robertson for a wee while. I better go and have a wee time to do it. All these things.
The boys do that, especially the elderly ones in one block. They'll say, well, Mrs. So-and-so's up there, that's number 5, so-and-so's in number 7. Well, we'll see her for a couple of days, but we'll see if she's all right.
The solution, time and time again in Glasgow, has been demolish this bit of town, move the folks to the edge of town somewhere else where they've got no services, they've got no access to transport, no jobs, no facilities, nothing. And then leave them there for decades and decades, then work out, oh, suddenly it's a slum now, so we'll demolish that and move them somewhere else. They're doing it again. We're here to resist them trying to shove us out of our neighbourhoods, trash up our communities, remove our right to public housing, which is something that people in Scotland have fought for decades. I mean, there's struggles going way back to the beginning of the 20th century where people rose up en masse against private slum landlords to demand the right to get housing, public housing built for affordable rents. And this is turning the tide backwards. It's not 21st century housing policy, it's a 19th century housing policy.
Our campaign has been about leafleting, getting through, speaking to people, organising meetings, and I think that's been a very effective campaign. We've not been drawn into daft discussions with the council that unfortunately some of the more registered tenants organisations have done. Because you can end up spending hours discussing absolute rubbish with the council as opposed to actually speaking to real tenants, so that's what we've tried to do. The estate meetings were really the cornerstone of the campaigns. It wasn't so much the meetings themselves as the building for the meetings. One meeting we put 4,000 leaflets out to build for it. We'd always put out one leaflet covering the arguments of the campaign as well as one leaflet for the meeting. So even if someone didn't attend, they still got the arguments, the information against stock transfer.
They say it's a not-for-profit company. They might not have any shareholders, but they are determined what happens in the market. They have to repay the loans that they're going to borrow. And as has been said, the only grant element of all this is the 300 million they're going to write off. The rest of the 2 billion is going to be borrowed, and you are going to be paying the interest on that 3-year rents. They don't tell you that in all the Glasgow leaflets.
You know, some people thought the campaign was going to be very hard and it's going to be very difficult to win the vote, and other people thought it was fairly straightforward. So between the two positions, if you like, there were a range of views, and people were, not afraid to come forward at a meeting and, interrupt somebody speaking halfway through because they were passionate about the issue.
Look past the glossy leaflets and go into deeper, find out more about stock transfer, find out more what it's all about before you say yes. At least do that.
The amazing thing is that we are actually picking up an awful lot of people who are saying they are sick and tired of the glossy leaflets, of the surveys that the council are carrying out. They really feel it's a hard sell and they actually find it's putting them off. Prior to Thatcher coming in, it was still quite, people in council housing were not frowned upon and kind of socially stigmatised. And what Thatcher did was to bring in this kind of stigmatisation that if you didn't own your own house, you were somehow less of a person. It's just a progression of that push towards privatisation and towards trying to get people, trying to compartmentalise the whole issues of ownership and renting and bringing in private money, and it's taking away public service. I mean, that's the way that the Tories and subsequent Labour governments have gone. That privatise things. You take them off the public account.
The meeting at Wester Hales, which Jenny was going to, was the only opportunity during the campaign that East had to publicly confront and expose Councillor Sheila Gilmore and Head of Housing Development Keith Anderson. Both housing leaders insisted that stock transfer was the only game in town, and backed by the chair, a Labour Party member, they argued that any other position was politically motivated.
I've been working, as I said, in housing for 28 years. For 20 of them, we've been arguing for what's called a level playing field. And the reality is we're stuck with a policy that we're within. And there is no prospect of that changing.
Really, it's not good enough just to say, well, it's government policy. I think councils have a duty to actually campaign to change government policy.
I don't want to be sitting around in 5 or 10 years' time to say to the children today, sorry, we can't improve the quality of your house. We can't increase the choice that you have for housing because we sat on our hands waiting for the government to change its policy.
The Labour government that you're a party member of, and that's the Labour government whose record on housing you're defending.
Well, actually, I'd like to make a comment. Jenny, stop
Stock
just a second,
transfer
please. Jenny,
shouldn't
if you
be
could just
part of
stop a
that.
second, please. Okay, this is not a political debate today, okay? I'd like to make a very clear point here, okay? Let's not turn this into a political debate,
No,
okay?
I'm not trying to turn it into
I've asked, can I finish, please? I have asked for this debate to be taking place today, and the point that people of the Wester Hales and the surrounding area are able to get answers to questions that they'd like to ask. Not about a political debate of the Labour Party policy.
He accused us of being political, but didn't accuse the other side of being political, whereas in actual fact, what they were putting forward is a political strategy of the present government.
This is a point that I was trying to make, maybe not very well. And I'm sorry if it sounds political. Actually, the political policy that we're opposing was instituted way back before there was a Labour government. It just so happens that they attached themselves to it, denied their own previous policies and adopted the policies of Margaret Thatcher. That's the only political problem that I have, and that's where you can't divorce this from politics. You just can't.
I think the guy was absolutely outrageous, but he's the chair of Wester Hales Rep Council. Previously, it used to be quite a strong campaigning body. We don't hear so much about it nowadays.
I think the subject of the debt write-off that was linked to stock transfer, the council expected to be one of their strongest cards, but quite often it was really turned on its head.
Yeah, well, I agree that there is money available if the vote is yes. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes.
There is a pot of money from the government.
Yes.
Scottish Executive. They've
Yes.
got money available.
Yes.
They're telling me in a pamphlet I've had through the door, if you vote yes, that money will be made available. Does that not sound like blackmail? Absolutely. Is that not? I could say to you, there's a nice car.
Yeah.
Right? But you're only going to get it if you vote for me. Now it's blackmail.
Blackmail is
You tell-
usually something unpleasant, isn't it? I mean, when you blackmail people into doing something.
I am actually being asked, vote and you'll have your house modernised in 5 years. Don't vote and it'll be 20 years. That's blackmail.
Now, blackmail suggests that people are going to be harmed in some way. I'm still waiting for people to say what that harm is.
At the moment, the council secures most of its money through the Public Works Loans Board, which charges a cheaper rate of interest for any borrowing that the council undertakes. In future, any borrowing that is done by the housing association will be from private organisations, from banks, from finance houses, and it will be at commercial rates of interest, which are higher than the Public Works Loans Board interest rates. And you will be paying for that through your rents. Sheila's always been on the right wing of the Labour Party throughout, as long as I've known her, which is at least 12 years. in Edinburgh politics. She's continually taken right-wing positions.
Privatisation suggests private companies which distribute profit to shareholders. That is not the situation. We're talking about not-for-profit, industrial providence society, which we set up any surplus, if we're in surplus in any given year as opposed to deficit, then that surplus will be reinvested in the homes. Now, it's maybe not the same as council, but it's not privatisation. I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think there is a definite role for not-for-profit organisations, whether it's in housing and elsewhere, and many, many people have been involved in that over the years. So I think, we mustn't just call it privatisation so that people think it's all going to be sold off and sold away.
The Scottish Executive calls stock transfer a major disposal of public assets. That's what they're quoted as. It's moving assets that are in the public sector out of the public sector. That's privatisation.
A private company is not covered by the Freedom of Information Act. Housing associations are not covered by the Freedom of Information Act. So if I was worried about the finances of a housing association, I cannot claim access to information under the Freedom of Information Act because they're not covered by it because they're a private company.
While I acknowledge and respect the fact that people have political opposition to taking any council assets out of council ownership, I have understanding and respect for that view. We have come to this conclusion that the alternative provides a better way to find Edinburgh's solution to this housing crisis. There is no alternative way to deliver these improvements and to keep rents at an affordable level for the next generation and the one after that.
Stock transfer was pushed incessantly to tenants, but even 10 times worse to housing department workers. There was a real culture of fear about speaking out against transfer.
Employees were given one side of the story and advised to promote that.
I was contacted by a number of housing department workers who were scared of even revealing their names. One person didn't even want his name to be put on computer, even though that name was never ever going to get circulated to anybody else. He just didn't want it registered on my personal computer at home.
Those people within the council, working for the council, who were concerned about stock transfer, perhaps didn't think it was a good idea, found it very difficult to express that point of view.
One of the workers in the housing department was leafleting in her own time, which she has the absolute human right to do as she wants in her own time, and she was pulled in, barracked and threatened with disciplinary action.
Certainly there was a feeling that it was the business of the council to sell this idea to tenants, and that the opposing view wasn't really worth discussing.
It was to expose the fact that here there was this organisation headed up by Sheila Gilmore, who were quite happy to sell off our houses for peanuts, for about £800 to £900. And yet she lives in a very nice house in a very nice part of Edinburgh. And I think if we'd have sold her house for that much, she'd have been absolutely black affronted. So we were just trying to make the point about the difference in treatment between us and her.
I think the thing that upset a lot of tenants was that their homes were being sold for just a small sum of £899. When you contrast that with what Sheila's house was like, it's in a very upmarket part of Edinburgh. It's not far from the Sick Kids, where we know the houses around there sold for, and there was at least £250,000 per house. So we would know she wouldn't like it if her house was sold for £899.
I was in a bowler hat and tails. Steve was dressed up as a fat cat, just this big, fat, fluffy cat outside Sheila Gilmore's house. Wee crowd of us, probably a dozen at most. Sheila comes out of her house to cycle to work, stops immediately she saw us and was straight on the phone, and all we overheard was, "And there's about 8 of them, and they have a wheelchair." Lord knows what she thought we were going to do with the wheelchair.
Fair, yeah. It wasn't hurting her in any way. It wasn't slandering her in any way. It was just making quite an interesting and useful point about if our houses are only valued at that much, how come your house is valued at so much more?
Three weeks before the ballot, East organised a Stop Stock Transfer conference with the Scottish Tenants Organisation.
The purpose of the meeting was really to bring tenants from Edinburgh together to discuss the way forward, because it was coming very close to the vote, and if you like, we wanted a meeting to sum up where we were with the campaign, to find what people were thinking, to have that final push, if you like, before tenants started to vote and the ballot papers went out.
There is a fight going on for the future of council housing, and it's a fight that we can win.
We all have the right to live in affordable housing of the highest possible technical standards in this day and age, and council houses is the added benefit that we all own them. We own them, we're publicly owned by us all. It's a brilliant idea.
And the thing is mentioned in Glasgow about community ownership. The community ownership is with the tenants under the local housing organisations. It's a complete myth. Every tenant who signs up to a local housing organisation has to sign confidentiality clauses where they cannot discuss any business of the local housing organisation with other tenants. Where is the democracy in that?
I listen to the Scottish Parliament to say, well, council housing is an old idea, belongs to the 30s, belongs to the 40s, belongs to the 50s. It's a brilliant idea, it's a modern idea. Take a look across the whole of Europe and you see people renting their house. And public authority rented accommodation is an exceptionally clever and forward-looking idea. It doesn't belong to the past, it's visionary, it's imaginative.
If in our campaigning tactics and the methods that we're actually using are not perfect, then we learn. And we use the methods and we use the mistakes that we've made to actually ensure that in the future we can actually succeed.
£1 million houses are 10 a penny in Edinburgh today. And what I meant by that is you can look across the Grange, you can look at Up Liverton where I live next to the Inch, you can look across the city and you see houses, £1 million it says in Evening News to buy that. And the reason that the house prices are skyrocketing, simple market economics that the capitalists always use, choke the supply and the demand goes through the roof. Well, the answer is you feed the supply. You build 10,000 council houses a year for the next 10 years, the prices will come down, everybody's got access to the right to have affordable, high quality accommodation. That's their right, not a privilege, and I deny them the right to take it away. Thank you very much.
We had almost 100 people attending it. Now, these were overwhelmingly tenants. Now, it broke up at one point into 3 separate forums. I had some business to do, but I ended up walking into each of the forums, and I went to the one on council house financing. and that's always been seen as a very dull subject, and yet there's a whole series of ordinary people discussing the implications of the public sector borrowing requirement to European Union convergence criteria.
The workshops were an opportunity for the activists to actually explain what they've been doing, bring their experience to bear at that particular meeting, and to listen to other people, some people from outside Edinburgh, listen to how they'd campaigned and make sure that, if you like, our campaign could take the best of other campaigns in different parts of the country. I think that's why the workshops were important.
We were told there was going to be massive investment and massive injection. We're finding out now the reality of the thing is that the more better off houses and better schemes are getting massive investment, and the most deprived, needy areas are getting nothing. You lobby, you campaign hard, and you fight, because anybody that fights and stands up for injustice to fight against it will prevail at the end, because they're the ones that are the bandits, they're the ones who are ripping you off, they're the ones who have got you in this situation, and it is a political ideology that these people know about giving you better homes. They want rid of social housing because they've failed for 40, 50 years in this country dealing with and managing social housing.
I think one of the highlights was Alan Walters coming up from the National Defend Council Housing campaign. He was very good in explaining where campaigns have been successful in other parts of Britain, and I think it gave us heart that we actually could win, and that with proper organisation, we're getting a broadsheet out, we could get to large numbers of people, and we could actually win enough hearts and minds, if you like, to actually be successful in the vote.
I think there's three things. One is we have to have the confidence that we can win. I think too many of us have been involved in campaigns over the last few years where we go through the motions, we protest, but there isn't really a conviction that we can stop what's going on. I think the hallmark of Defend Council Housing has been we're not protesting, we're fighting to win. The second thing is we have to have the arguments. Now, on this issue, actually it's not hard. All of the arguments come down in favour of direct investment in council housing. It's cheaper for councils to build, to manage and maintain council housing than the alternative. So there's no economic case for privatisation. This is all about governments, whether it's at Westminster or the Scottish Parliament. It's all about governments making a political decision, and those political decisions can be changed. I think the third thing is this has to be a bottom-up campaign. We want to get politicians on our side. It's good to have stunts, but this campaign will be won on the estates. It will be won when the vast majority of council tenants hear the arguments and use their instincts, all their experience that privatisation has been crap across a range of services, and that public services, in general terms, are for the benefit of ordinary working class people. I think if we can combine those things, people's instincts to hard arguments and a determination to win, then we can overturn Edinburgh Council in the way we've won no votes in other areas too.
There was two ways that we got information out to tenants. One was through the press, and the other was directly through their door and through leafleting. Leafleting was the really important one because that's information that's been put together by tenants and it's been put together for tenants. So the fact that it's being dropped through your doorstep, the tenant on the other side of the door knows that someone has taken the trouble to walk around the whole estate and is putting it through everyone's doorstep. I mean, when you're faced with that sort of 3 or 6 or blocks of high rises, and you think, Lord, there's a lot of effort, but there's something very nice about sort of you get the lift to the top, and then you just work your way down with your fellow leafleter, and there's a real rhythm. There's a feeling of achievement that if you just leafleted a high-rise block, that's a lot of flats that you just leafleted, and you're doing it with someone else. The pair of you are carting around big bags, which by the time you get to the bottom are wee bags. So there's an achievement there that you share with the other person that you're doing the leafleting. And not only that, because you're not just meeting the other leafleters, but you're meeting people who are opening the doors and who are in the corridors and who are saying what you got. And so actually, you know, you're getting information back too.
Because it's actually, that's my granddaughter,
Hey.
that's my daughter, that's my son, that's my niece. We all stay in the one block of flats. And these blocky flats is like it's got a community feel about them, So if it moves, split us all up, which they all do eventually, if they get their own way with this private housing association. Because increase the rents and that, you'll find a lot of the folk. Because this land and everyone kens each other. Well, everyone kens each other in this block of flats. We've got our own caretaker, Andy.
Yeah, we met him.
Well, every day he cleans the whole flats. Hoovers, mops the lifts. Everyone gets on well in this block of flats. And you've got the dug. That's what I'm saying. What other block of flats can you get in just... my door's open all the time and you're playing on the landings. Anyway, I'm going back into what my telly.
Come on the table. We got the pool table in.
Oh, his own man. He got the pool table for us. We were going to go for a full size, Getting the big pub ones, We've got to get one of them, but this doesn't even fit in the door. So we need to twist it and turn it, can't you get in the house and that, but it's no bother, because it goes in, it comes out, as you can see. Nothing at all.
What about the views from up here?
Oh, fantastic. Well, we look onto the fourth,
What, views?
The view.
Take them in and show them the money couldn't buy you the views.
Oh.
Priceless. Come through this way.
Come through the view. Oh, you're gonna love
I've got
it.
the best views in Edinburgh. What you wearing there?
You want to see the whole, You want to see the whole of that side, you want to you want to see the other side,
Okay? You okay with that? As you can see, if you come up here, the views are actually breathtaking if you're up here. We've got the whole of the fort. This is Craigentine Golf Course here. We've got the bowling green also down here. And if you keep on going round, you've got Musselburgh, Dunbar, Long Nidre. Further round you've got Dalkeith, Walliford. You couldn't pay for these views. All these private housing associations are what to charge folk extortionate rent and all that, but look at the views for here. You want to put them in rented accommodation when they're just looking at a brick wall, and that's unbelievable. Whereas now I'm quite happy with this. I'm quite happy with the council, and they've gave me this, so I'm quite happy with that. To me, it's a total waste of space. They've privatised the housing in Glasgow. That's went upside down. The folk there aren't happy, and the same's got to happen here. They're just a trial and error. It seems to me it's got to be error all the way. There's not going to be a winner here. It's just everyone's got to lose.
Despite all this intensive campaigning, canvassing, phoning people up, etc., they still don't know what the outcome of it's going to be. I was talking to councillors and some of the housing officers and people just in the council chamber for the council meeting this morning, and I was just stopping people as they were walking past and asking them, and they were quite, you know, sort of really vague and kind of, you know, I can't get a handle on this, don't know what is going to happen, don't know how the vote's going to go, not sure. You know, some people are definitely for, some people are definitely against, some people don't know and don't know if they're going to vote. You know, the whole kind of range of options. So it proves that however much publicity you put out, however much you bombard people with information, they still don't necessarily get the message anyway, or they're not interested, or they don't see that they've got a stake in the outcome of what's going to happen. I think we fought a good campaign. I think we've worked our socks off as much as we could with the money, the time and the number of people that we've had that have been prepared to make that commitment to fight a campaign. And And I don't think we've done a bad job. We've certainly made a few bloody good points, points that I know have upset the housing officers.
So, Jenny, where are we?
City Chambers in Edinburgh.
Hi, it's Lisa. What's happening here?
We're waiting for the announcement of the ballot result. So we waited in the public area, and along came somebody from BBC Scotland, and we stopped her and we said, excuse us, we're just wanting to find out what the ballot result is.
7,301 voted no, that's 53%, 47%.
Now we know why we're not allowed.
Yes!
Oh, super! We just, pardon? She said, oh yeah, it's a no vote. Oh, yes, that's why we're not allowed. Sorry. Oh. That is. I am gobsmacked. I am lost for words, absolutely. I just think it's wonderful. At last we've got some blooming sense. Yes. Oh dear.
It's just a big result. Great result for the tenants of Edinburgh. A great result for campaigning on the ground against sticking a big two fingers up to the politicians who try and manage tenants, who try and manage people's opinions, and the people fought back. And it was a real David and Goliath battle where the people had their say. And I hope the politicians actually take the chance and listen to the people this time, you know. It'd be about time that they do.